My name is Cheryl Johnson Ransom. I'm the Director of the Office of Employee Development and Wellness Services. Our office hosts the Snack and Share support groups, and today I'm joined by Ryan Smith, our Wellness Program Administrator, who will be assisting with monitoring the chat box. I'd like to welcome all of you today. If this is your first time attending the support group, we appreciate you joining us. If you have attended our sessions before, we certainly want to welcome you back. I would like to take a few minutes and talk about the objectives for the support group. First and foremost, we have intended for these support groups to serve as a safe virtual space to gather and gain a sense of belonging. And these support groups began nearly a year and a half ago during the pandemic, when we recognized that all of us were going through some challenging times and adjusting to the COVID-19. And so because of that and limitations around having opportunities to connect, the virtual space was certainly our go-to approach with the support group. We intend for this to be an opportunity to discuss work-life concerns. And because these are challenging times, we see this as an opportunity to encourage and promote stress management and to talk about ways to cope and handle stress. Throughout our past year and a half of offering the support groups, as well as other offerings, we certainly have as a focal point theme of encouraging everyone to practice self-care. And in the final analysis, we just recognize the importance of taking control of what's within our reach in terms of focusing on setting goals for what we can do to help ourselves deal with certainly challenging times. We also use this support group as an opportunity to provide information on Georgia State and University System of Georgia resources, share updates as they occur. And last but not least, we invite feedback and want to hear from our attendees on your current concerns and welcome suggestions for future discussion topics. After each support group, we do a follow-up, and we'll certainly provide a copy of the PowerPoint, as well as invite you to complete a survey that will give you an opportunity to share some feedback. And if you have thoughts about what you'd like for us to consider addressing in these gatherings, we welcome that information from you. We also want to touch on some ground rules for these sessions. And again, because we are concerned about people feeling safe and comfortable in this virtual setting, and because we cover a wide range of topics, we also realize that this is an open invitation for anyone to come with any perspectives, any thoughts and feelings and concerns. And we take that seriously in terms of just wanting to respect that people come with different perspectives. And certainly we appreciate that and welcome that people might share whatever thoughts and concerns that they have. We invite and encourage everyone to just give yourself permission to acknowledge wherever you are in your journey, in your work-life journey, and certainly just feel comfortable knowing that there's no prerequisite, there's no expectation in terms of what we look for in terms of attendees. We ask that you just feel free to share your concerns and questions and comments, or not. That's not something we want to pressure people to do, but we encourage that. And again, we invite you to use the chat box today if you'd like to do so. We want to emphasize that what is addressed in these gatherings stays in these gatherings, and we just ask that people be mindful of that. And last but not least, we know that this time of day for a lot of people is considered a lunchtime, a break time. So certainly if you want to consider this an opportunity to grab a snack as you participate, we invite you to do so, and just consider that as another way to de-stress. As I mentioned, we decided to create these support group sessions as an opportunity for people to gather, and it historically goes back to just looking at this journey all of us have been on in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. And if we take a few minutes and just review over the last nearly 2 years, what it's been like in this chapter of our lives. To sum up, certainly we know that this has been a stressful time. It's been about trying to cope, and we also recognize that although we talk a lot about the COVID-19 as a major stressor, that certainly there are other stressors that people deal with in their work lives. And we know that everyone's household, everyone's situation is different. And there's no way that, we can just sum up and describe a picture that's going to apply to everybody. But we just want to be respectful of the fact that we know that people have different life situations, and for some that list of stressors may be longer than others, and we take that very seriously. There have been a lot of ways to sum up this chapter of our lives, and certainly for some there's a lot of reference made to the new normal. That has caused some debate, and depending on just your own perspective and frame of reference, certainly that is one reference that is appropriate. We also talk about this defining or redefining this chapter in terms of it being a new pandemic era, and certainly for all of us, this is a new chapter in which there's no history that we can draw upon in terms of looking at an exact replica of what we're facing now in terms of the history books. But we know that things have been ever changing, and lots of transitions have occurred. We have certainly come a long way over the last year and a half and close to 2 years in terms of this pandemic, looking at how many of us have been juggling and adjusting to both personal and professional challenges around transitions. Returning to work is a big topic. Certainly before we went on holiday winter break, for many of us at Georgia State, on all campuses, there was a focus on just looking at how we make those adjustments. And again, for so many, it's been a different scenario, both on campus as well as in personal life. But we want to certainly think that if we look back at the beginning of the pandemic, the start of the COVID-19, that certainly we have come a long way, and it has been encouraging, depending on the day, certainly in terms of the kinds of things that are occurring. But we had an opportunity to go out on holiday winter break, and now we are back in a new year. And certainly we want to extend New Year greetings to everyone, and just pause as we talk about 2022, what that looks like, what that feels like. And certainly, just as with any new year, it's very typical for most people to consider it a time of celebration, a time of recognition that it's out with the old, in with the new, looking forward to a fresh start for some, defining or redefining goals and strategies, both personally and professionally. Um, we also know, though, that it's not necessarily a time that everyone celebrates, and depending on everyone's situation, both personally and professionally, it can definitely be a time perhaps that is difficult uh, to celebrate in a positive way. But I want to pause here and just ask all of you to think about, what does the new year represent for you, or what do you think it may represent for others? And now that we have certainly entered into 2022, and if you think back over the last couple of years or even before that, if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, either from your own perspective or perhaps on behalf of others, feel free to enter your comments in the chat box, and give you a few minutes to reflect on that. And as you reflect on that, I also want to just ask everyone to think about where you are at this point of time in the new year, and ask yourself, how are you doing? How are you feeling? And how are you physically feeling? Are you practicing self-care? Are you trying to take charge of your physical, mental, and emotional health? And certainly those are three areas that we consider so critical. We talk about health and well-being. And if you find that perhaps you're not taking good care, or not taking charge of your health, if you have thoughts about what may be causing some interference, causing some barriers to that, if you have comments that you'd like to make, I invite you to enter those in the chat box, and also consider if you have thoughts about what others may be experiencing, whether you think about family, close friends, co-workers, colleagues in your support system. And certainly this is no right or wrong approach to addressing this segment. It's not about expecting people to be at a certain place or to feel a certain way. I mean, this is really about just recognizing that everyone is entitled to their feelings and to be wherever you are in your journey. And we want to just acknowledge that and recognize that that is critical in terms of people taking good care of themselves. It's just first getting in touch with where you are, and having an opportunity to address those feelings, and share and process those feelings in places, in opportunities where it feels safe and comfortable. And as we move into the topic of today, certainly just know that at any time in this gathering, feel free to enter any comments that you'd like to make in the chat box. So our focus for today is one about embracing optimism in this new year. And certainly just the implication of that is one that we're trying to identify some positives. Want to just talk about what optimism means, and clearly it is about trying to be at a place of having an attitude that reflects that belief or hope that whatever the outcome or endeavor might be in general, that there's a positive attitude about it. There's one of approaching it in a favorable and desirable way. Very simply put, it's feeling hopeful, feeling encouraged. And certainly there are times when all of us might relate to the fact that that may sound easier said than done, depending on someone's situation, absolutely. And we know that it's not always easy to do, to lean toward a positive or optimistic approach. But actually, there is something called learned optimism that we want to touch on today, and recognize a psychologist who coined this philosophy. Martin Seligman is a psychologist who has done extensive work on positive psychology and is considered the founder of what's called learned optimism. And very simply, this refers to a process of developing the ability to shift someone's thinking from a negative to a positive perspective. Again, just generally, it's recognizing, first of all, that there is a need, there is an opportunity perhaps, and hopefully there's a desire for someone to work on that. But it is a process, and depending on, again, everyone's individual circumstances, it's not something that can always be simply done, depending on what the focus is, what the desired outcomes might be. Dr. Seligman actually coined and developed what's called the ABCDE model for learned optimism. And very simply, each category or each phase is one of the process that is encouraging and intended to help people address whatever the focus is and approach it in a way of again, learning how to make the shift from perhaps a difficult place to having a positive outcome. And before getting into this model, I see that there is one comment that's noted that I do want to just recognize. So I see there's a comment from someone just first describing that they're doing well, they're feeling great away from work, that the emotional aspect of health and well-being is great, but there are some work-related challenges that might be causing some stress that makes it difficult in terms of having positive experience dealing with professional work life. And thank you for that comment. Certainly having some challenges around work and personal relationships can obviously create some stressor, and depending on the circumstances, one aspect of life can be in balance or positive, and the other aspect may not be. And so if there's an out of balance kind of situation that you're dealing with, and one that may not be readily resolvable, that can certainly create some prolonged stress that can be difficult and challenging, and not necessarily a simple fix. But for a lot of people, I know that this is not something that's uncommon in terms of relationships, whether it's personal relationships or work relationships. And in this kind of scenario where we're talking about relationships, it's always important to start with self and look at what part you play, and look at what aspects might you be in control of managing or handling, because certainly as it relates to other people, then we know that there are limitations, that we can't change or control other people, no matter who those individuals might be. We may have some impact or influence, but the focus certainly does need to come back to self, and that's really the theme of these support groups. It's the theme of just encouraging that people take good care of self, particularly during these challenging times. So you may come back to that point later before we wrap up today, but just a couple other references to this ABCDE model of learned optimism. And again, this is about just slowing down the pace of life long enough to take the time to really examine what it is that you might be addressing. And so, for example, and this really ties into this typical new year, new mindset set phase. You know, if you're thinking about goals or thinking about challenges, whatever it is that you're wanting to address, if it's about goals, it might be trying to work on weight management, or eating better, or exercising better, or working on relationships. And so that first category is one of adversity. It's just identifying the situation that calls for a response. You know, what is it to do? And then the next category is belief, you know, how we interpret the event. So definitely it's about looking at a situation, if it is a goal that you're working on, and identifying what's been your approach. How have you dealt with it in the past? You know, are you coming from a place that's feeling frustrated or negative? Something simple like exercising, if you are trying to do better when it comes to creating habits or a routine that is more positive, you might tend to look back at the past and decide perhaps you haven't done a good job in terms of following through, not feeling good about what you have done in the past. And the next phase, consequences, looking at, you know, the way you have handled the situation. How have you responded? How has it made you feel in terms of your approach to whether it's that goal of exercising, or trying to lose weight, trying to eat better. The next category is disputation, and that is really just about acknowledging that if you have had a tendency to come down on yourself, be hard on yourself, be negative about what you have or haven't done, to address whatever that situation might be, that goal might be, then to really be kind of your own devil's advocate, if you will, and to think about, well, what's something positive that you can identify that you have done. So instead of focusing on what you didn't accomplish, you know, perhaps if it's something as simple of looking at your exercise routine, you know, what did you actually do in the way of actions that you can just acknowledge that there were efforts made, that you did something, it didn't add up to just nothing at all in addressing whatever that goal was. And the more that you try to identify those positives, then hopefully that last category of energization is one of causing you to begin to feel better and more motivated the more that you just look at, all right, you have done some positive things, whether it's looking at efforts made in the workplace, efforts made in other settings outside of work, that you can build on that. And that can cause a shift in just how you might believe in terms of moving into continuing to address whatever it is that you're wanting to address. And clearly this is a pretty simplified description of the model, but the essence really is about, again, looking at the importance of trying to shift from a place of negativity to positivity. And again, recognizing that, yes, some things are easier said, some things are easier done than others, but the bottom line really is about to recognizing that there are proven benefits to optimism. And studies have revealed that there are far-reaching benefits that include an improvement in better mental and physical health. Optimism can help just in terms of increasing motivation. And believe it or not, there are studies that are looking at the lifespan and longevity. And it is believed that just people that focus and maintain more optimism as opposed to pessimism or negativity live longer. And last but not least, there's also just the sum total of looking at how there's an impact on reducing or lowering the stress levels. And as we identify, particularly these stressful times in which we work and live, then certainly when we add up all of the stressors that we're dealing with, if ever there's a time to try to address stress and try to figure out ways to lower the stress level, then certainly that's what this is all about, and that's why this is important to look at. So here we are, in this new year, and yes, that typical reference that most of us make, have to do with New Year resolutions, and the thought, the mindset, the discussions for many center around expectations, whether it's just our own or others that may be offering suggestions that we need to focus on, looking at making changes. And certainly, though, this is an individual matter, and this is another one of those areas that it's a personal matter, and it really is about every individual just deciding, first of all, how you're feeling, and owning whatever you're feeling. And if, first of all, this is not a time of year that you feel you want to celebrate or do anything special, that's okay too. Everybody's entitled to that. But in the spirit of what we're hoping to convey in the message and take away for today's theme, it is about encouraging everyone to try to be positive and grateful, and to start with practicing gratitude, and recognizing that it's so important that although depending on everyone's individual life circumstances, there may be a lot of difficult struggles that may be in place, but every day when we wake up and start our day, if we just start at a place of recognizing very simply that each day is an opportunity to try again, to start again, to consider how we want to order our day, what goals, if any, we want to set. And so very simply, starting with that positive attitude and developing a practice of gratitude is one to consider and perhaps build on. And if you choose to build on that, then certainly we encourage that again, because setting goals, whether it's a new year goal or something that you're looking at doing throughout the year, that should be something that's meaningful to you, the individual. Some people may feel pressure or have expectations they feel coming from others, but bottom line is everybody needs to decide that. And I think the more that you find something that is meaningful to you, that too can have some bearing on the outcome and whether or not the goals that are set are reached. And moving into the next tip is one of looking at encouraging people to be specific in setting goals. So again, if you decide to think about goal setting, it is important to try to be as specific as possible. And we do talk a lot about setting SMART goals, and that's something that is addressed in our health and wellness programming and opportunities that are provided for people to do some health coaching. But when we talk about SMART goals, it's just an approach that really helps you get organized, helps you really kind of define better and look at how you can approach whatever goal you're wanting to address in a very intentional way. So being not only specific, but measurable and looking at what's achievable and realistic, and also identifying some timelines that can really help create a phase where there's a greater chance for positive outcomes. And so that's another important factor to consider. Tracking your progress, certainly whatever goals that are set, it's important for them to be monitored. And just as we touched on very simple references to learned optimism and that approach through the ABCDE model, it really is about monitoring and keeping up with what's happened, what's been the action plan, how has it gone, and paying attention throughout the process. It's also extremely important to factor in some stress relief, stress management. And so again, the emphasis in this new pandemic era is one of continuing to encourage all of us to first acknowledge, that these are stressful times, and sometimes we don't even realize that stress is not always about the negative or the problematic kinds of stressors, but the positive ones can certainly be important to acknowledge too, because it all adds up and our body doesn't distinguish negative from positive when we're dealing with a lot of factors. The more we're dealing with, the more severe and extreme, then clearly there's a need to address stress management and looking at what you can do day to day to bring on some stress relief. And the one size fits all approach isn't realistic, certainly, because everybody's situation is different. And so it's about just recognizing, though, that there's a need for everybody to take a look at your situation and decide based on whatever it is you're dealing with, what may work. And you may draw from what's already worked from past experiences. And if anyone has any thoughts to share about what they have been doing, what has been positive, and what has worked as we're entering into a new year. Certainly, I invite you to share comments in the chat as well. As we move on, though, to talk about the last couple of items, we know that sometimes things get in the way. There are barriers. There are circumstances, some that are out of our control in terms of the outcome of our goals. As we touched on earlier, if it involves, challenges dealing with relationships, whether it's at work or in our personal lives, it may not play out favorably. What we hope to accomplish, what we hope will happen. But whatever it is that you're trying to work on, we hope that you might give yourself permission to go easy on yourself and not be so hard on yourself in terms of giving up. And that's where that negativity can take over. But there's always an opportunity, again, if you think about the day-to-day, to start over, to try again, to maybe try a different approach. But, if things didn't go as well as you hoped they might, then maybe there's a need to look at a different strategy, to really examine what you've been attempting to do. And that's where we want to end with just the message of recognizing that sometimes there's a need to ask for help. And help can come in a lot of different forms, from a lot of different sources, for a lot of different reasons, starting with just your own support system. Sometimes we take on perhaps too much, more than we can deal with alone if we don't have some help. And so that may be looking within your family support system. It may be looking within your friend support system. It certainly may be looking at your professional support system as well. Again, depending on the circumstances and the nature of whatever it is you're dealing with. But the message here is one of just recognizing that sometimes asking for help, being open to help, and just getting another perspective even can make a difference in terms of how things may play out and with respect to positive outcomes. Certainly professional help is also encouraged as another option to consider, just again, depending on circumstances and what has or has not worked or helped. And so certainly that's part of the reason that our office is here, and that we are available to provide you with some resources within our program, but also we want to share and help people get connected with resources in other places too, whether it's on our campus at Georgia State or elsewhere, just really depending on the individual situation. That will determine what kinds of feedback might be provided, what kinds of recommendations might be provided. So as we begin to wrap up today's session, just wanting to touch on the fact that we pulled together, as always, our list of campus resources, as well as references to a couple other important resources with respect to our office. Certainly, we just want to emphasize that our team is available to not only provide some wellness programs and activities, but individual consultations for health coaching around stress management, nutrition, and physical activity are available. And sometimes when we talk about the goal setting, we talked about the SMART goal setting, as I mentioned earlier. It does help when you can talk things out and process and get that feedback. It just really depends on how serious and committed you might be. But just wanting to again, promote that this isn't a resource that's available through our office, as well as faculty and staff assistants, our internal EAP offering support services and confidential consultations, whether it's one-on-one telephone or virtual, or because we are transitioning back to on-campus work, there's an opportunity for that as well. But this is an important resource that's available, and just wanting to remind people about that. We've listed other campus resources that I won't spell out, but you will receive this PowerPoint that will be available for future reference. I do want to mention about the University System of Georgia resources, and specifically mention the KeyPro external EAP vendor that offers at no cost counseling sessions, work-life resources for Georgia State faculty, staff, and eligible family and household dependents. And this is an excellent resource that's available. The work-life resources cover a range of legal, financial, childcare, elder care concerns. So again, this is just another resource that we want to emphasize, because as we talk about asking for help and looking for places where people might go depending on situations, this is just one that is noteworthy. We've listed some other resources, typically just covering a range of topics, certainly starting with our GSU COVID-19 updates, and resources for employees with children. We certainly recognize that there are a lot of employees who have children, have their childcare concerns. There may be other concerns as well, but certainly for those who are parents or caregivers for children, we have updated a resource base for those individuals to just check out and explore where there's a need for some additional support, and also touching on the USG Wellbeing events. As we started off, this is about trying to address the health and well-being of individuals. And when we talk about health and well-being, we are talking about physical, mental, and emotional well-being, and how all aspects of well-being are so critical. And people have different needs and different interests, and the well-being events cover such a wide range that we encourage everybody to check out and see what might be of interest for you. And last, just to mention that CDC and has been a go-to resource for us to just promote and encourage people to check out as another site for updated information on a variety of topics. But certainly our focus has been one pretty consistently to talk about managing, coping with stress. I'm going to stop here and just ask if anyone has any final comments or questions that you might like to make before we wrap up today's session. And as you consider wrapping up, and whether you have any comments or questions, certainly again, we want to remind you that we will follow up with an email and survey, and we invite your feedback and certainly suggestions as it relates to future topics for discussion. These are monthly support group sessions that will continue in this new year, 2022. And because we do try to select different themes for each gathering, it really helps when we hear from those of you who attend to get some thoughts, certainly about your impressions of what we've already addressed, but also if you have ideas about other topics for consideration. So just please know that that's something that we always welcome. In closing today, we certainly want to thank you again for your attendance and appreciate you joining us for today's topic on embracing optimism in the new year. Like to leave you with one parting thought, just to underscore what we touched on earlier, but in the spirit of considering optimism and embracing optimism in the new year, we invite you to think about the practice of gratitude and to consider, if you are open to goal setting, that your first goal on this topic would be to consider trying to weave thankfulness into your daily life, like naming one thing you're grateful for on each morning commute or each night at dinner with your family or others. And just remember, an attitude of gratitude makes you feel more positively toward others as well as yourself. So on that note, thank you again for attending today's session. Take care, stay safe and healthy.